You are not just tired. You might be treating fear like a duty. If your body keeps moving after the shift ends, if your mind is still calculating before the day is over, if still hands make you feel guilty, this isn't just about productivity. It's a Sabbath problem. Stopping feels morally unsafe, so you prove you're responsible with one more task, one more hour, one more small act of control. We'll separate diligence from compulsion using scripture, not vague encouragement, so you can tell if your pace is obedience or fear in work's clothing. The first correction comes early. Genesis 2 and Exodus 16 show that rest isn't just allowed after security arrives. It is commanded before the wilderness even feels safe. Let me put it plainly. In Genesis 2 to 2-3, rest comes before human scarcity enters the story. Finished work is followed by blessed rest. Time is marked and set apart before survival pressure starts bargaining with the soul. That means rest isn't permission granted only after every bill, threat, or tomorrow question has gone quiet. Rest can come before safety and still be obedience. So when you whisper, one more shift, one more task, one more hour, listen closely to what's speaking underneath. Diligence has limits. Compulsion cannot stop without fear punishing it. And the problem may not be laziness at all. It may be fear dressed in responsibility's clothes. The wilderness test isn't only about food, it's about reflex. In Exodus 16:29% -30, the people receive manna by rhythm, not panic. Daily bread is given in 6 measured days. On the 6th day, a double portion. On the 7th, a command to stop. Not because their hunger was imaginary, not because the wilderness had become comfortable, but because God was teaching them trust is a measured container, not a leak that must be patched every hour. That matters, because fear always tries to turn provision into hoarding. It says, gather more, prepare more, commit more, take the extra shift before the threat arrives, answer the message before it becomes a problem. Fill every open space, because an empty space feels like danger. Maybe that's exactly how your week is starting to sound. You plan, but the plan never settles you. You prepare, but preparation only multiplies. You work, but the work doesn't end at the boundary of need. It follows you into the evening, into the quiet, into the place where your body asks to stop, while your mind hands you another reason not to. Here's the warning. In the wilderness, the issue wasn't whether bread mattered. Bread mattered. The issue was whether scarcity would be allowed to govern the body's reflexes after God had already given a boundary. That is the line between diligence and compulsion. Diligence can plan for the 6th day and receive a double portion through discipline. Compulsion, however, cannot stop on the 7th day, because stopping feels like losing control. Diligence works within a container. Compulsion leaks constantly, draining peace hour by hour. So, if rest feels reckless to you, don't be quick to call that wisdom. Fear may have trained your nervous system to treat obedience as risk. When that happens, rest no longer feels like trust. It feels like danger. The command widens here. The Sabbath is no longer just a wilderness test, with manna on the ground in the 7th day asking whether the body can pause. In Exodus 20:8-11, the Sabbath becomes a boundary drawn across the whole household. Not just for the person who feels spiritually ready to stop, nor only for the one who has finished every task. Sons, daughters, servants, animals, even the outsider within the gates. The entire rhythm of life is told. 6 days for labor, and the 7th is not to be turned into another marketplace. That is a weightier word than wellness. Wellness can become optional. It can be postponed until bills calm down, until inbox is clear, until the pressure finally loosens. But command is different. Command does not ask whether your nerves feel ready. Command marks a day on the calendar and says, this household will not be ruled by endless production. Hold on to that. Because in Deuteronomy 5:12-15, the Sabbath command is tied to memory. Israel is told to remember slavery, to remember Egypt, to recall what it was like when another power measured human life only by output. Rest is not presented as a reward for peace. It is a refusal to rebuild the old chains. The calendar itself becomes a memory of escape. Every seventh day is a quiet protest against the voice saying, "You are only safe if you keep producing." Every boundary set around the household says, "Egypt does not live here anymore." And here lies the deeper problem. Fear can smuggle Egypt back into a free person's week. It doesn't always arrive sounding cruel. Sometimes it sounds responsible. It says, "Of course, you should check one more thing. Accept one more commitment. Of course, this pause must be justified. This hour must earn its place. This rest period must prove it is not laziness." Slowly, without chains on your wrists, the schedule begins to speak with a slave master's voice. You may still pray. You may still say you believe God provides. But if every open space feels dangerous, every quiet hour brings guilt, every limit feels like a threat to survival, the issue is bigger than personal stress. It has entered covenant memory. It has returned to the old question of who owns the rhythm of your life. Healthy stewardship can make plans, count costs, rise early when the season calls for it, and carry responsibility without drama. But stewardship remains a tool in the hand of obedience. It serves the life God has given. Fear-driven labor is something different. It takes the tool, grips it tighter, and lets the tool give the orders. It tells the body when to stop, the mind when to worry, the soul when it's allowed to breathe. That is when labor stops being a servant. It becomes a master. The Sabbath command is not soft or sentimental. It is a hard boundary drawn through the household and memory, preventing the old chain from quietly rebuilding inside the calendar. If fear is ordering your schedule, nonstop labor may not be faithfulness. It could be a counterfeit disguised as responsibility. Psalm 127 doesn't attack labor itself. It attacks the kind of labor that rises early, stays up late, and eats the bread of anxious toil, as if your body can be fed while your soul quietly starves. This is strange bread. It can pay the bills, keep the lights on, and make you look disciplined. But if every bite is mixed with fear, it trains you to believe God provides only while you keep yourself exhausted. You know this feeling. The clenched jaw at night, the hand reaching to check one more message, the small wave of shame when you finally sit down, because sitting still feels like abandoning your post. The quiet but forceful thought, if I stop now, something will break. Let me be direct. Matthew 6 does not pretend food, clothing, the body, or tomorrow are imaginary concerns. Jesus names them. He brings the fear into the open. But then he refuses to let tomorrow become the ruler of today. The warning isn't against responsibility. It's against anxiety taking the throne and calling itself wisdom. So the difference isn't simple tiredness. A faithful person can be tired after honest labor. A responsible person can plan, work, earn, provide, and carry weight. Scripture doesn't ask you to become careless, but obedience may labor and still refuse to worship panic. Hebrews 4 draws the line even sharper. There remains a rest for God's people, and the call is to strive to enter that rest, not drift into it, not escape into it, but enter it as an act of obedience. Rest isn't running from life. Rest is walking through the door God left open, even though fear stands outside insisting the door is dangerous. So ask a harder question than, am I tired? Ask what your tiredness is serving. The evidence loop closes here. Scripture has drawn the boundary, and the modern burden only makes the warning harder to ignore. WH and ILO findings on work hour risks, along with worker-reported stress and studies on workaholism, all reveal the same clear pattern. When hours stretch under constant pressure, the body pays the price. This isn't abstract health talk. It's the tightness in your chest, the rising irritability, the foggy mind, the restless body that can't find peace even after the work ends. A worn-out body doesn't prove that fear is wise. It might just mean fear has been pushing a limited resource too far. So boundaries must be set before collapse, not after. One last question. Am I working because it calls to me, or because stopping feels impossible? You're not doomed, but don't mistake panic for obedience.